This video will cover the integration between Shipa and GitLab. And the purpose of this video is to explain how to deploy your existing code that is hosted today on GitLab to a Kubernetes cluster or multiple Kubernetes clusters using Shipa. So the scenario we're going to be talking about is me as an application developer. I'm going to place my code on GitLab as well as any application dependencies that I might have for my application in a requirements.txt file. I'm gonna place health checks if I need to, environment variables, and any type of hooks inside a file called shipa-ci file in my Git repository, in my GitLab repository. And I'm gonna have GitLab CI basically build and test my package or my application code and deploy it to existing Shipa pools that I already have created or a platform engineering team has already created and given me access to. Once this is done, me as a developer, I don't have to do anything other than just commit my code to GitLab, and GitLab will then deliver the application to the respective Shipa pool, and the Shipa pool will be responsible for validating all the permissions, security checks, attach the resource plans, create the objects based on the Kubernetes cluster. Doesn't really matter for me as a developer if it's a GKE, an on-premises Kubernetes, Oracle Kubernetes, or any other Kubernetes version. I'm just responsible for sending my application code. I'm not creating any YAMLs or any Kubernetes file. Shipa will do it all for me and we'll make it cluster agnostic. So me as a developer, I don't have to worry about it. And it's gonna give control of my environment to the platform engineering team. So we know that security standards have been met, as well as the cluster destination configuration and others are in place. Platform engineering team can rest, and at the same time, development team and myself, I don't have to worry about it. So let's have a look at the environment we have here. So looking at what we have here, we have our Shipa instance. And as mentioned, we already have clusters connected to it. As you can see here, I have clusters coming from Oracle Kubernetes Cloud, Azure, and Google Kubernetes. And I already have my pools created, the pools for each cluster. And as mentioned before, you can also have multiple pools per cluster and so on. But for the simplicity of this example, we can use the GKE1 cluster, or GKE1 pool, which points to my GKE1 cluster. I can see all the nodes, the units, I can see the metrics, as well as monitoring information. And my goal today as an application developer, I don't have to worry, as mentioned, about creating any type of Kubernetes objects, learning Kubernetes, setting up security, and anything like that. The pool has already been added, clusters have already been added by my platform engineering team, and me as part of the development team, I just have to submit my code. When we jump to GitLab, let's see what we have here. We have an application called Shipa, and it's a simple Python application. And when we look at the Python code, what we have is just basically Flask, and it's creating a route. And when we access that route, it basically shows you delivering on Kubernetes. So it's a very, very simple Python application. Aside from that, we have a proc file, for example, which basically tells Unicorn to start listening on this IP and port as soon as my application goes up. And I have a requirements.txt file, which shows that I need Flask for my application to work. And I need Guncorn on these versions to have my application working. I have a shipa-ci file, but the shipa-ci file right now, it's empty, so there's nothing I needed in there. But as mentioned, you as a developer, you can use the shipa-ci file to include hooks, for example, into your application. So if there are scripts that you want to execute during the build or after the build when your application runs, you can use that to automate it. Or you can place, for example, health checks for your application. So if the health check doesn't pass during build or deployment, Shipa rolls back everything. So let's go back here to GitLab. This is the structure of my application. When we look into the GitLab CI YAML file, we have a very simple build. It's pulling up an image from Ubuntu 18. I'm just running some updates into the system. I'm installing Python pip. And here comes the part that is important for Shipa and GitLab to be able to integrate. I'm running pip install shipa-ci, which is the Shipa's component responsible for integrating GitLab and your CI tools to Shipa. And I'm now using shipa-ci to deploy to this specific server, Shipa server, and using these credentials, which you can use email and password, or you can use token as explained in our documentation. And I'm using GitLab to basically create my application. It's gonna create an application called, we're gonna change the name, but an application app 9. The application is a Python app, and I wanna assign it to team admin, which I'm part of, and a pool GKE1, which is the pool that we showed here before. As soon as this is created, I want GitLab to, again, in this Shipa server, deploy my application code. So these are variables that I'm passing to GitLab, so I don't have to expose on the application code itself. And if we go into settings, CI/CD, and variables, for example, you can see these variables being set up here. You can set these variables as well as the application name and others. Again, these are part of the settings, CI/CD, and then variables. Let's go back to our files here. Into the GitLab CI. Let's edit this file directly. So for the sake of simplicity in this demo video, we can just do it directly here. Let's call it the application GitLab demo. And it's going to be a Python application because it's a Python code that I have here. And once the application is created, I want it to deploy my application to GitLab demo, which is the app we created right here. As soon as I commit my changes and we go to CI/CD pipelines, we're going to see that it already started. It's pending the job. And it will start running in a few seconds. And GitLab will follow pretty much the sample or the usual CI pipeline. It will start building and testing my code, and once it's done, we'll then create the application on Shipa called GitLab demo, and it's gonna deploy the application there. If we go to Shipa, the applications, there are no GitLab demo app right now. So GitLab will be creating that automatically directly from the CI pipeline. We can see that this is starting here right now. It takes a little bit of time, and I think that's usual for every code to deploy through a CI pipeline. Great, now it's running unit tests. It's installing shipa-ci right now. And we can see that the app create already executed, and it's now into the deployment of the app. So let's go back here in our Shipa dashboard. If we search for it, we can see GitLab demo already, and we can see it's creating one unit and it's running. Now it's in the deployment process. And if we want to look more specifically at the logs of what's happening, we can use Shipa app log, which allows you to see the log for your specific app. The app is going to be GitLab demo, and we're going to use -f, which is to follow the code. We can see that Shipa is now deploying your code directly to the GKE1 cluster and GKE1 pool. Great. And we can see that it started listening already. So the deployment is finished. When we go back to GitLab, we see job succeeded. And when we update here on Shipa, we can see GitLab demo. We can see the application endpoint already created. And if we access the application, we can see delivering on Kubernetes, just like we have on our code. So now you have your GitLab delivering directly to your GKE cluster. And again, you can use any of the clusters. You're not pointing to a specific cluster. You're pointing your application actually to a Shipa pool. And the Shipa pool will be responsible for creating all the objects, all the Kubernetes related objects, the integration into Kubernetes, the access and the endpoint URL for your application, the CNAME is going to be automatically delivered. So those are things that we're taking off the developer's plate and allowing you as a developer to focus on delivering your code rather than creating YAML files for Kubernetes objects, learning how to deploy your application. And on the platform engineering side, you're providing your developers with an enhanced or an improved developer experience when dealing with Kubernetes and platform. Hope this was helpful. Thank you.